You can support In the Past Lane with as little as $1 a month. Just go to the support page at our website, inthepastlane.com. Thanks.
Whoa, hit the brakes. You've arrived at the #1 drive-by for American history. Welcome to The Pit Stop. Brought to you by In the Past Lane, the podcast about history and why it matters. Here's Edward T. O'Donnell, your host and historian at large.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Pit Stop, your Monday source for history on the go in just about 5 minutes. If you're new to the podcast, we offer this mini feature every Monday, in addition to our full feature episodes, where I talk to historians about their latest books. Here's what happened in American history the week of August 26, 2019. Let's start with birthdays. August 26, 1935, that's the birthday of Geraldine Ferraro, who was born in Newburgh, New York. Ferraro grew up in New York City and became a teacher and then a lawyer. In 1978, she won election to the United States House of Representatives. And in 1984, Democratic presidential candidate Walter Mondale selected her to run as his vice president. They lost that election in a landslide to Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. August 27, 1908, the 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was born in Stonewall, Texas. Johnson assumed the presidency following the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. In the course of his 5-year presidency, LBJ achieved the ultimate mixed legacy. On the one hand, he's widely praised for playing a decisive role in gaining the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, plus his Great Society programs to alleviate poverty. But LBJ is also remembered for his decision to escalate the war in Vietnam, a move that cost the lives of 58,000 U.S. military personnel, not to mention 2 million citizens of Vietnam. August 29, 1809, is the birthday of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., who was born in Boston, Massachusetts. Holmes served on the High Court from 1902 to 1932, and he wrote the opinions for some of the most significant cases in Supreme Court history. Perhaps his most famous quote came from his opinion in a landmark free speech case, in which he said, quote, "The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic." August 30th, 1893, that's the birthday of the Kingfisher, Huey P. Long. He was a colorful governor and later U.S. Senator from Louisiana in the 1930s. Long gained a national following through his Share the Wealth campaign, which called upon the federal government to provide a guaranteed income to all Americans, paid for by high taxes on the wealthy. As Huey Long put it, "When you have a country where one man owns more than 1 million people, you know what the trouble is." September 1st, 1907, is the birthday of labor leader Walter Reuther, who was born in Wheeling, West Virginia. Reuther rose to prominence as president of the United Automobile Workers, a position he held from 1946 to 1970. He also served as the 3rd president of the Congress of Industrial Organizations in the early 1950s. In addition to his efforts to gain a better deal for American workers, Reuther was also a staunch advocate of civil rights, women's rights, and universal health care. Okay, what about events? August 26, 1939, Major League Baseball's first televised game is broadcast on station W2XBS. The game featured the Cincinnati Reds taking on the Brooklyn Dodgers at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, New York. August 28, 1963, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. led hundreds of thousands of supporters in the famous March on Washington. The event culminated in King's legendary I Have a Dream speech. This speech, especially the I Have a Dream portion, has achieved iconic status in American history. But it's often misrepresented by journalists and political leaders who want to portray King as a man whose only message was a call for peaceful coexistence. The truth is, King was a radical who offered a fierce critique of racism and the political, social, and economic institutions in American society that upheld it. That would explain why, in 1963, on the eve of the March on Washington, a Gallup poll revealed that about 75% of Americans opposed the March on Washington, and 75% of Americans had a negative view of Martin Luther King. August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union successfully detonated an atomic bomb. This was early on in the Cold War, and the news shocked the United States. Suddenly, the U.S. monopoly on nuclear weapons was gone. And to make matters worse, there was mounting evidence that some Americans, spying on behalf of the Soviets, had provided them with top-secret U.S. information on nuclear weaponry. Coincidentally, 14 years and 1 day later, on August 30th, 1963, the United States and Soviet Union established a hotline for direct communication between the White House and the Kremlin to facilitate diplomacy and to prevent a nuclear war. September 1st, 1985, the wreck of the ill-fated British ocean liner RMS Titanic is found in 12,000 feet of cold Atlantic water just south of Newfoundland. September 1st, 1807, former Vice President Aaron Burr, after a sensational trial for treason, is acquitted. Just 3 years after killing Alexander Hamilton in a duel, Aaron Burr seems to have gotten involved in a scheme to detach a huge chunk of territory from the United States to form an independent nation with him as president. At least that's what his accusers alleged. And if you want the whole story, check out In the Past Lane episode 89, where I speak with historian James E. Lewis Jr. about his book, The Burr Conspiracy, uncovering the story of an early American crisis. Okay, time for the last word. Let's give it to labor leader Walter Reuther, who was born 112 years ago this week. Here's what he had to say about social justice and the need for society to address the needs of its most vulnerable citizens. There is no greater calling than to serve your fellow man. There is no greater contribution than to help the weak. There is no greater satisfaction than to have done it well. There is no power in the world that can stop the forward march of free men and women when they are joined in the solidarity of human brotherhood. Okay, people, that's your history fix for the week. Now put it in drive and go make your own history.